Welcome into the IDP Plus Bets studio. My name is Billy Mansell at Ombre Vendor on Twitter, and I am here for a very special Bets episode to talk about the way too early Heisman bets for potential future bets that you can put in right now and maximize your money. I've put together some just knowledge that we know right now to where you can put that in your portfolio and you will have at least one of these bets in by the time we actually get to the season. And based on what I'm seeing right now, there's a few contenders here I think that could easily fit the description as a Heisman frontrunner, even though we are in April and the season doesn't even kick off till August. Now, I will preface everything I'm saying with there is another transfer portal period. There could be some more movement that comes around that will affect some of the lines, I'm sure. But I'm here today to just kind of give you a couple that if you just wanted to sprinkle a little bit of money on right now, or if you just, want to go straight for it, put a full unit on it, you can go ahead and do that. And at least you'll have this ticket in by the time the season comes around. So let me pull up for the visual audience. I will pull up the betting lines courtesy of DraftKings, and we'll get right to work here. So as you can see at the top, first of all, I'm betting in Illinois, so I can't have any Illinois players. Not that that's a factor. If you're a fan of college football, you probably understand that. So I got the board pulled up right here, but we'll get to that in 1 second. I'll just kind of let you look over the lines while I talk about this past knowledge. So of the last 7 Heisman Trophy winners, 6 were quarterbacks. So that should already kind of narrow down who we're looking at here. But just in case anybody forgets, 2020, Devonta Smith from Alabama won the Heisman Trophy. It was a weird year, kooky, weird year, where Trevor Lawrence wasn't really good enough to give him the Heisman Trophy. And while Mac Jones was the quarterback throwing to Devonta Smith, he wasn't really having a Heisman caliber season to the point where I don't think that the Heisman voters really thought that he was a super deserving candidate. And if anybody remembers, Devonta Smith was going off that entire year. It was also a COVID year, so that was kind of funky. But he was a very deserving winner. I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but there was just no quarterbacks to give it to, plain and simple. It was literally the outlier in all of these other years. So I'll just go through the last 6 other Heisman winners other than Devonta Smith. We had Jane Daniels won it last year. 2 years ago was Caleb Williams, the presumptive number 1 pick in this year's draft. Bryce Young, the number 1 pick in last year's draft, was the winner before that. Joe Burrow won it in 2019. Kyler Murray won it in 2018. And Baker Mayfield won it in 2017. Now, I am not making any kind of arbitrary cutoff here. I am just trying to say those are the last 7. I think with the new era of the NIL port and the transfer portal, I think it is kind of a little bit different of a sport than it was back in the days of, I think it was Lamar Jackson who won it the year before then. I think it's kind of a different sport than it was back then, to be perfectly honest with you. So I kind of just wanted to stick with the 7 last ones because I think this is the era that we live in right now. So what is one thing that each of those 6 quarterbacks had in common? Well, I'm here to tell you, each one of those picks had a first round wide receiver on the roster when they won the Heisman Trophy. So this year, Jaden Daniels has Malik Neighbors. He is projected to be a top 5 pick. I would say at least he's going to be top 10 if you've been following draft coverage. So that checks off the box for that one. 2022, Caleb Williams won. He had Jordan Addison, who was a first-round pick for the Minnesota Vikings. In 2021, it was Bryce Young that won it. He had Jamison Williams on his team, who was a first-round pick. He went to the Lions. In 2019, when Joe Burrow won, of course, everybody remembers he had Justin Jefferson. He also had Jamar Chase, so that was 2 double number 1 picks in his wide receiver core. 2018, when Kyler Murray won it, he had Marquise Brown, and then a future pick would have been CeeDee Lamb, both first-round picks. And then 2017 is kind of weird because Baker Mayfield did not technically the year that he got drafted have a first-round pick on his team, but he did have Marquise Brown, he did have CeeDee Lamb, and he did have Mark Andrews, who is the tight end for the Ravens, all on the roster. So I think we can collectively say that was probably at least worth 1 first-round pick for him to be throwing to. So guys, just starting out straight off the bat, that should tell you that this award is kind of given to a player that might have a great first round talent on their roster. And as we flip back to the board, we have Carson Beck, who is and Quinn Ewers, or the first two picks in next year's draft, or next year's Heisman Trophy, at least according to DraftKings. I'm here to tell you, neither of those players is going to win the Heisman Trophy. I am planting that flag right now. First of all, Carson Beck is not going to put up the stats. He is also losing Ladd McConkey to the draft this year, potential first-round wide receiver. He's also losing Brock Bowers, who is also a first-round tight end who was a major source of production for Georgia last season. Now, he is going to gain. He gained Trevor Etienne, which is Travis Etienne's brother. There was some legal trouble there, so he might not play at the start of the season, but he do have a good running back there. And they do have a couple of good wide receivers there, but in all, they're losing most of their wide receiver core. So I actually kind of think that's a cross-off. Quinn Ewers is in a similar situation. He's losing Xavier Worthy, and he's losing Adonai Mitchell. And he's losing Ja'Tavion Sanders as well. And he's losing Jonathan Brooks, who's the number one running back. So I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of going to cross Quinn Ewers off of the list as well. Those two just simply don't have anyone there that I am just like, that person is for sure going to be a first-round wide receiver. Now, the first person I'm actually going to bring up is a little bit lower on the list, and it's kind of weird. So just stick with me. And that would be Mr. Brady Cook from Missouri. Now, listen here. I know what you're probably thinking at home. Missouri? Like, what? How are they? No, nobody from Missouri is going to win the Heisman Trophy. And I'm just here to tell you he has the number one wide receiver in this upcoming 2025 class on his roster in Luther Burden. Now, I understand that it is Missouri at the same time, so that is going to kind of call into question some of people's beliefs in Brady Cook. And while the stats last year weren't jump off the page worthy, he also was sharing the backfield with Cody Schrader, who pretty much swallowed up any potential touchdowns, even on the ground, that he was going to get. He is a super senior. This will be his fifth year. Last year, he had 3,300 yards, 21 passing touchdowns, 6 interceptions, as well as running for 300 yards and petting 8 touchdowns in the end zone on the ground. Now, with no running back there, I can see that number spike up quite a bit, and I can see the rushing yards potentially going up quite a bit too. Having Luther Burden there, to me, is kind of the major key here, because having the number one wide receiver on your roster, on a first-round wide receiver, is kind of a telltale sign that you potentially could. I expect the Mizzou Tigers to be good this year. I don't know how great they're going to be. Last year, I believe they finished either 9-4 or 10-3, which was a good season for Mizzou, and I could definitely see him repeating that. Look, LSU this year wasn't great either, and Jaden Daniels ran away with the Heisman. Now, the one thing I will bring up is there's not a lot of rushing production from Brady Cook as far as yards go, which is kind of what put Jaden Daniels for sure over the top this season. But I could see those yards going up, and I'm not going to say he's going to rush for 1,000 yards. I think that would be crazy to say. But I do think that he will have enough rushing touchdowns to warrant the total touchdowns and total yards being something that Heisman voters could look at and definitely put some money behind, or put their vote behind. So I would start there, 35-1. I know that is kind of a long shot bet, but at the same time, I actually think he might be my front runner at this current point in time. All right, so we'll stick with our wide receiver theory and go to Noah Fifita. So he is losing his number one wide receiver this year to the draft, but I'm here to tell you this. He has a second wide receiver on the draft. I'm not going to butcher his name. It's like I'm not even going to try it. It starts with a T, and the last name is McMillan. He should be in running to be a first-round wide receiver out of Arizona. They're also moving to the Big 12 this year, which I think also could mean a lot of good things for Arizona. They did lose their head coach, Jedd Fisch. He is now coaching elsewhere. So I could see that being a problem, but I don't think so. I think this is going to be perfectly fine. Arizona is ripe to have a great year in the Big 12. I think they can very well be in contention. And that's another thing I forgot to mention, is that if you're going to win the Heisman, you've got to at least be thinking about, challenging for a playoff spot. And this year, I think that, with 12 teams being in there, there's a lot more margin for error for some of those teams. Now, you can tell me, Billy, well, LSU wasn't really competing. USC wasn't really competing. Yeah, but we didn't know that the whole season when those two teams were going. So the fact that those two are the last two teams to have Heisman winners, which also meant a lot for the stats, like, I'm not actually all that worried about that. And Arizona is kind of ripe to have one of these crazy good offensive seasons to where I think that Noah Fifita could fulfill that. So my second best bet for this concept is Noah Fifita. I think those are the only two based on that metric that I would feel comfortable putting any money on. So that being said, let's go to the next quarterback I would think about throwing some money on right now, and that is Shedeur Sanders from Colorado. Yes, Deion Sanders' son. Now, there is kind of a aura around Shedeur Sanders, and the thought is that he may be the number one pick in next year's draft. As you can see with some of the guys I named, all drafted extremely high. Jaden Daniels, high. Joe Burrow, 1. Bryce Young, 1. Kyler Murray, 1. Baker Mayfield, 1 as well. If Shedeur Sanders could easily be the number one quarterback being drafted next year. Now, while he does not have a top, first round wide receiver on his team, I could see the potential of that offense elevating enough off of what they accomplished last year to where maybe they build one. Maybe they build a wide receiver 1 that's going to be drafted in the first round out of the talent they have in Colorado. I'm not going to be overly shocked if that happens. At the beginning of last season, everybody was like, whoa, Shedeur Sanders, whoa, where's he coming from? So I would throw some money on this as well. 45-1 for the presumptive number 1 pick in next year's draft. Yeah, that seems like a pretty easy bet. I would definitely put money on 45-1. I think it's I don't feel like the market is quite caught up to that yet. I don't think anybody's looking. Like, I think DraftKings kind of just put this out and then stopped thinking about it, because the fact that the number 1 pick in the draft right now potentially is 45-1 is just bonkers to me. Okay, going on to number 4. We're going back. This is kind of a little bit, closer odds. We're going with Jalen Milroe out of Alabama. Finished the season strong last year. He did slightly lose his job at the beginning of last season, which I know had a lot of people worried, but I wasn't worried a lot, kind of, but not a lot. But as the season went on, season got rolling, he really got more comfortable. His rushing ability is going to have him putting up stats each and every game. And with the new coach that they brought in from Washington, I think that this team has a potential. I mean, we just saw what he was able to do. Now, it's not the same offensive coordinator, but we do have we saw what Michael Penix could do, and Michael Penix was a front runner for the Heisman for a lot of the season. Some argue he probably should have won it. That's me. But, whatever. He was in contention most of the season. And Alabama, although I don't think that they have a number 1 wide receiver on this team that'll be a first-round pick, I do think that they have enough talent on this roster left that I think that he could easily be in this. So Jalen Milroe, if you want to get somebody who's a little bit more of a front runner and favorite, I would put Jalen Milroe in my portfolio. Okay, last one I have for today. Last one I feel good about, at least for the time being. Let's see if I can find them, and that is Cam Ward from Miami. Cam Ward has had an interesting career. He started at a D2 school called Incarnate Wood. Had a really good, really high ceiling there. Really liked what he was doing. Transfers to Washington State. First year there was pretty good. Not great, but it was pretty good. Last year, he had a phenomenal season at Washington State, at least for what Washington State was. The fact that Washington State wasn't good or wasn't better was not any fault of Cam Ward. And I think with Cam Ward transferring to Miami, you have the flashiness, you have the wherewithal, everybody knows Miami. This is more of just if he can build them back into the Miami of old, the one that everybody and your dad and your uncle and your brother are telling you from the early 2000s, if Cam Ward can be a cog in the wheel to make that team that good again, then there's no way that he's not going to be one of the top Heisman frontrunners going into this season. I just don't see it. I mean, I don't see why he wouldn't be at least. And I think that the fact that Miami has been down for a while actually is going to help his cause, because he's going to come in there and be the best quarterback they've had in a while right away. And I'm actually kind of excited to see where they end up. Okay. With all that being said, those are the 5 best picks I have. I do want to mention a couple more just to kind of get you at least thinking about them. I don't have any money on all of those. I have at least actual cash on. The rest of these are just ones that I feel decent about, but I do want to see more. One is Jackson Arnold from Oklahoma. I was a little off on his bowl game, but I think with one full season, he could be good enough to potentially get in that. Miller Moss from USC. Look, Lincoln Riley has won 3 of these darn things, so you would think the starting quarterback for USC would be good enough. He did throw 6 touchdowns in the bowl game, which looked incredible. I can't say that I'm a believer right now, because they do have a quarterback right behind him, which is actually hilarious because he's the same odds, Jaden Mayava, and that could just potentially be it. Like that, one of those two could win, and the fact that they both don't have starting jobs right now, we kind of need to see more. The last one I'll bring up is Travis Hunter from Colorado. Look, he plays cornerback and he plays wide receiver. That is very bizarre, and that is kind of the ripeness that you need to get into the Heisman conversation. The fact that he can point to not only his receiving stats, but also what he does on defense. If he catches like 5 picks and has, 1,300 yards receiving, that is definitely going to get invited to the Heisman Trophy ceremony, which, by the way, I mentioned Shedeur Sanders not having a top 5 wide receiver, and I forgot Travis Hunter. That is totally on me, because Travis Hunter is a top 5 wide receiver, but he can play both positions, so it's kind of a cheat code. But that is all I got for you today. Those are the best bets I have right now sitting here in April for the Heisman Trophy. I am very happy that you all came and listened to this today. Thank you so much, and be on the lookout for more Heisman content, because as the college season approaches, I'm sure we're all going to be talking about it on this channel. Thank you.